It could have been louder, just so you know, Vice Chairman Epley. We're going to go ahead and get started. I do apologize for the delay. We had a couple of technical issues, and then, of course, being stuck on the floor for a bit. What we're going to do, committee, and I appreciate Tanya Keys. We've canceled you once. We were hoping not to do it again, so we appreciate you being here today. I just thought it was important for more than just one committee to perhaps learn more about the structure and how DCF operates with the foster care system, because some people are more knowledgeable of it than other individuals, and some people hear things and then it becomes misinformation, and then it just kind of expands from there. Second thing is that I hope that the more of us that understand how the process works, that through this series that we hope to do a few of before session ends this year, is to kind of start at the top. So I visited with Secretary Howard, and Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary, was kind enough to be here with us today to kind of start us with the high level of how it comes up here and how it flows out. And then at another point, we'll hopefully have the opportunity to meet with some of our regional managers and how does that kind of work with them in our regional offices. So, Tanya, I want to thank you for being here today, and if you'll step up to the mic, welcome to committee. I think you had to rush in from Kansas City, I believe, didn't you?
Oh, no, I've been here, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Landwehr and committee members. Thanks so much for an opportunity to provide a little bit of high-level information on the foster care structure. You have a presentation in front of you around the foster care overview. So we'll go through a little bit about structure, show you a few maps, and even a little bit of highlight on data just for today. I wanted to start with a little bit of the landscape. So I got to take off my glasses, sorry. On page 3, as you're aware, the Department for Children and Families has some major programs: economic and employment supports, rehabilitation services, child support services, that is supported by a central administration. What we're going to focus on today in this presentation are the prevention and protection services, also known as child and family well-being. We're going to talk about those core programs as well as the regional offices and the intersection there. So that's going to be the focus for today. On page 4, we've got a little bit of information on what might be, a traditional organizational structure. So on the right, you can see at the top, that's our central administration, Office of the Secretary. Underneath that, speaking specifically about the child and family well-being services, there are 4 major program administrators in central administration. Those include our, assessments and thriving families. So when we get a report, we go out and assess those. We have a foster care program, prevention programs, and also we have data systems and quality assurance. So those are the major programs as they sort of relate to the Office of the Secretary. In addition to that, for child and family well-being, we do have a number of operational supports behind the scenes. Within our audits department, there's a child welfare monitoring unit that is specific. We monitor financial reports that are sent in, also have legal counsel, and of course an Office of Customer Service. The other piece that we're going to dive into a little bit more today are the 6 regional offices. We have 36 service centers across the state, but those are organized under 6 regional directors. Examples of efforts and dedicated positions in those regional offices are our protection specialists who are going out on those reports. We also have liaisons to help coordinate foster care and prevention or family first services. We have some folks who do performance improvement, case reviews, and then we also in our regional offices have post, for foster care alum who wish for independent living services, our regional offices do those adult independent living services. That gives you a sense of the structure and how it relates to the secretary. In general, the Central Administration for Prevention and Protection Services, they do a lot of policy development and grant and contract administration. The regions are really focused on managing teams that help support the field work. That's the distinction. On page 5, a little bit more about the intersections then with our providers. In general, when we're doing our body of work and we've received a report on a family, we make a decision on, we could make a service decision level. Sometimes those service decision levels are really within the community, but sometimes we need to make that referral. That referral could be to a prevention provider. It could be a referral to a foster care provider. So there are some of our partners who rely on us to sort of set the pace for they need a referral from us. On the right side of page 5, kind of wanted to talk about some common denominators across whether it's a DCF or our provider. Across those are intersections of quality assurance and case review. Customer service is managed by DCF as well as our case management providers. The case management direct service, depending on the level of service, could be done by either. Today we're going to be focused on foster care. And then there's also shared responsibility for policy and practice development, and you've got some details there. The day-to-day management of how it's carried out in the field. So for example, a regional director might have as a colleague or peer or be in a lot of innovation or problem-solving meetings with their colleague at the case management agency. The 4 foster care agencies are KVC, Cornerstones of Care, TFI, and St. Francis Ministries. And they have sort of a peer position, a program president level or a program manager level that would be a peer to a regional director. I mentioned earlier there are foster care liaison positions in the regions. There are also peer manager positions within those foster care, those 4 foster care case management agencies I mentioned. The next sort of layer of detail wanted to be able to provide as context are some of the duties and collaboration. So we'll start with central administration. Central administration has overarching responsibility for contract development, management. We liaison a lot with our federal partners. We have that role. We review and monitor customer service tickets at a trend level. We organize the financial reports. So we have a lot of administrative responsibility. That said, we are alongside our partners, foster care case management agencies, to also help do program improvement, innovation, connect them to training, supports, and what resources they need to be able to really be alongside families. In the region, their general support is they're a little bit closer to the work alongside the family. So they're identifying maybe relative resources. They're facilitating some regular meetings with those providers and families, maybe some managed care organizations. So they're doing some additional administration. It's a little bit closer to the family and community that they live in terms of coordinating with those partners. At the family level then, and I'm on page 7, those regional foster care liaisons are even closer to the day-to-day work. So they are part of a team that would attend family level information or child level information. For example, they could attend a best interest decision. Those are specific to, sorry, now I feel like I'm shouting. They're specific to same school attendance. There's placement stability meetings. There are a number of other collaboration meetings that those in the region, they could be directly involved in those meetings. They monitor due dates for court reports. Depending on the judicial district, they may attend court hearings. Different judicial districts have different procedures with that, but their role as the foster care liaison is probably the closest to the work alongside the family. On page 8, just wanted to give, a few examples of some of the decision pieces and who might be doing what or who would have authority or responsibility. I mentioned earlier that in our body of work, DCF could make a decision on a prevention decision or community-based service. So responsibility for prevention services might be with DCF. Sometimes schools help make those decisions, community agency, or the family might even refer themselves. There's a lot of collaboration in our assessment process to figure out those decisions. Regarding the removal into foster care, the decision around that, law enforcement and courts have the authority to remove a child into the custody of the secretary. DCF does not. We do, in terms of collaboration, convene a team decision-making meeting to get all the partners, the families network together to talk about the safest decision for the child, but it's law enforcement and court who have that authority on that decision. Case plan goals, the foster care provider does make that decision, and they collaborate in different team meetings to make that decision on what's in the best interest of that child. Placement decisions are the responsibility of the foster care provider, with a few exceptions. We are working in a collaborative model in team decision-making placement stability, which means maybe if there's a need for a planned move for a child, or maybe there's some worry that the child may need to move and there might be some stress in the placement and a possible disruption, we get the team together, and could even include the child's guardian ad litem, but we have a team decision-making process to get together to think about what is the best placement decision for that child, and we want to prevent any move that we can. There are a couple of decisions that the court needs to either review or ultimately approve or disapprove. For example, qualified residential treatment placement. So placement decisions largely are the foster care case management entity, but there are a couple that require either court review, approval, or the court may object to any placement. So it's a collaborative. I already mentioned same school attendance. That happens with the school and the provider. And then the permanency decision in terms of when a child reintegrates is the foster care provider. But as you can imagine, that also happens a lot in collaboration with the team as they're planning. Some examples of some services that the foster care providers are engaged in alongside the family. So they have some wellness pieces. They're doing some screening and assessments. They are facilitating family meetings, arranging parent time, and then they're also doing the case plan development and court reports. In your packet today, we just provided as reference for today or future discussion a number of maps that have across our service providers. I believe page 14 is specific to foster care. Foster care is across 8 catchment areas, and I mentioned we have 4 providers for those 8 catchment areas. But you also have maps for family preservation and family first, if you're interested. In terms of trend data, wanted to let you know that the need for foster care in Kansas right now is about 6,500. That's down about 15%, almost 1,000 children from 2019. We appreciate that that's a collaboration of an opportunity to be alongside families with a lot of prevention services, family first, family preservation, school-based services, as well as some timely and increased permanencies. So we're really excited for families that the need for foster care in Kansas has decreased. You also have that the number of children removed into care across years has decreased in the past 2 years. In state fiscal year 21, just over 3,000 children were removed into foster care, which is down from about 4,000 in 2019. The last data you have on 18 just kind of shows the distinction. You know, I mentioned that the need for foster care has decreased in the past couple of years. That is related to more children ending or exiting foster care than entering. So that's how that comes about, and you've got the trend there. You also have, I think maybe in your packet, some information on collaboration pathways. Those are just some infographics to help folks understand the pathway to a prevention service and a little bit of context to who our collaborators are in the community. For example, 1-800-CHILDREN, courts, mental health centers, managed care organizations. There's really a network that supports the foster care program. That's the background information in terms of structure that we have for you today. I know it's really broad. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tanya. Questions? Representative Epley?
Tanya, I want to thank you for coming and give us some current data and information. These foster care providers that you talk about, I know they vary a lot across the state. Is there an average on the number of people that make those decisions on those placements? Is it one person in each office, or is it a committee, or how does it? I mean, how do those placements work at the foster care provider level? Can you give us a little more information on that?
Sure. Within the foster care case management provider agencies, so for example, KVC, TFI, St. Francis Ministries, and Cornerstones of Care, they have a team of case managers. So you might have a case manager approach. Some of them use what they call dyad, so they might have a case manager and a clinical staff or a supervisor that are focused on a child, and they have they have guidelines, some best practice standards for a caseload. For example, one practitioner who's a case manager might have anywhere from 15 to 20 children that they're serving. And those children could be siblings or they could not have siblings, but it's a ratio of one practitioner case manager to a set or a number of families. And those would be for whatever geographic area that their office covers.
Well, thank you. Does that vary from provider to provider on the caseload? I mean, for one provider, because I think the sweet spot's about 1 to 15 or maybe 1 to 20, but I wondered if you could reflect on that. And then the other part of my question is, when we all came into office, 5 years ago, there was a concern about the number of kids that were having to spend the night in offices. I don't know if you can measure that or if there's a metric for that. I wondered if you could reflect on where we are with that and if that's, if that still has to happen from time to time or not. It was about 77 kids, I believe, a night is the number that sticks in my brain from that. But that was 5 years ago, and I didn't know if you could reflect on that currently. So those two issues, please.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. So your first question regarding caseloads, the standard for an ideal or a preferred caseload comes through Council on Accreditation. There are accreditation standards, and we require each of our providers to stay within those. We require them to be accredited, but then also then espouse to those standards. The standards have some flexibility. We do receive monthly caseload sizes for each of our catchment, those 8 catchment areas. There are some differences, and those differences are based on, on the last day of the month when you take a snapshot of the number of families or children assigned to a practitioner. If you have a number of vacancies and you've needed to make sure that every child has an assigned case manager, then that caseload might go up. So if any given month your office is experiencing vacancies, it can vary. So yes, there is difference, but they all have the same goal to stay within those accreditation standards for foster care.
What are those, if you want to share that with the group?
The accreditation standards for foster care are ideally serving between 12 to 18 children. There are some variables. For example, you would need to take into account the tenure of that practitioner, also the type of case goal, maybe the age, and there are exceptions for sibling groups.
And again, and I'm done. The second part of that question was kids that don't have a placement and they have to stay in an office overnight. Do we have any way to measure that or know where we are?
We do, actually. We have a term for that called failure to place. The failure to place, or children who are staying in offices, is part of a critical incident notification system to the secretary. So each time that happens, wherever it happens in the state, we receive notice, the secretary does, through a critical incident. We count those by day. I know that in January, there were 5 instances across the state involving 4 youth, pardon me. So we track that every day, and there's a policy and procedure notice system that each of the 4 foster care providers follow.
Again, so from 77 down to probably under 10 cases on average, then, I mean, that's a dramatic drop. I mean, it sounds like in 5 years.
Yes, that's our goal. And as part of the settlement requirement, we are to eliminate that practice so that we are supporting providers, caregivers, foster parents, relatives to make sure that doesn't happen. But our goal is to eliminate that practice.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your answers.
Representative Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm the only one on this committee that's actually had to take children and place them under the court's order. I started with SRS, and I remember the transition, and I know how bad it was under SRS because we had more kids out of custody at that time. And I think you've done a better job. The only, I guess, thing that really bothers me is your contract agencies, the 4 that you have. You can go around the states. It's very frustrating for judges because, you know, their contract ends, they don't get renewed, and then they have to create a new agency, and sometimes they hire the same people that they hired before, and it's always a cost-cutting, or the lowest bidder gets the contract. And there's just a couple of questions. One, what's the average stay now of someone in foster care?
The average length of stay, the average number of months in foster care for all children is 24 months. Those children who reintegrate or leave the foster care system for reintegration, their average length of stay is 12 months. Children who leave the foster care system for reason of adoption, their average number of months is 39 months in care.
If I may follow up, you know, and I think everybody in this committee would agree that the state is a very poor parent. Up until about 15 years ago, the court could not consider relative placement, and the statute actually changed, maybe it's a few more years than that, to allow family placement with relatives, aunts or uncles. However, if an aunt or uncle is out of state, then you have to go through the Interstate Compact, which takes about 6 to 9 months to get that done. And in the meantime, they're sitting in foster care, and if the foster parents want to go on vacation, they contact the agency who replaces them somewhere else, or if there's an allegation made, then your agency investigates it, and if it's, which takes a long period of time, your investigation. And in the meantime, you remove that child from that house and place them somewhere else. So they get moved, and if you've got a great foster parent who wants to keep the child, sometimes based upon a decision that I don't know where it comes from, you actually move the child, and the child wants to stay at the foster parent, and the foster parents want to keep the child, but yet you still move it. And I'm just talking about real cases with real people. And I've seen kids raised and were actually, one time I had to reduce the age of a child that was adopted from South America so that I could get her out of high school. And of course, at that time, if I kept her in custody when she got out of high school, you actually paid for a couple of years of her college, and I was very appreciative of that. But it's not a perfect system. I think you're doing better, but when I talk to my friends in the court system, they still think it has a long way to go. I'm sorry, that may not be a question, that was just a statement.
Madam Chair, if I may respond, thank you for bringing up a couple of pieces, Interstate Compact and relative placement, and then I'll talk first about, you mentioned, you know, a circumstance where maybe there was a family who wanted to go on vacation or for whatever reason needed to be gone for a while and couldn't provide care. We do have options of respite care. We offer at least 2 days a month for relatives and licensed providers that they can have 2 days of respite every month. They can accumulate those. So I don't know that circumstance, but we have tried to implement in the past 3 years additional supports to caregivers so that they can have respite, so that if they need to take a vacation or other things are happening in life, that child can there are provisions where a child can go into respite or temporarily live somewhere else while that family tends to what they need to tend to. Our goal is that 50% of children are placed with relative or kin, and we're getting really close. Last month, we were at 45%. KVC and Cornerstones of Care are in December, we're almost 48%. So we are striving to make sure that if the safest decision for a child is to be in foster care, that they have an opportunity to be with someone that they know. So there's an emphasis on that, and we have Children's Alliance of Kansas who's really helping us with some training curriculum and support for relatives in a kinship origins curriculum. The third point you brought up was Interstate Compact. Yes, Interstate Compact can bring some timeline challenges. We are excited to have a border agreement with Missouri so that for children within 60 miles of the Missouri state line, if they have a relative within that parameter, that they're able to go stay there after some background and safety checks, they can go and live there before the Interstate Compact is approved. There are also other provisions where a court can request from another state a Regulation 7 Interstate Compact, which requests within 30 days that ICPC. We know families want to be together, and I think all states know that Interstate Compact shouldn't be a barrier, and we're trying everything we can to make sure that that process can be as efficient as possible.
One more question. When you brought that up, talking about foster care, are you active? You used to call it the MAP training. I'm not sure what you still call it the MAP training for foster care?
I believe it's called MAP, PS, and TIPS, but yes.
Okay. What is the agency doing to recruit more foster parents? And what would be the average amount of time that a foster parent is a foster parent? Because I know a lot of them get into it and then get out of it. If you have that available. If not, you can supply it.
Sure. I mean, we'd love to come back or at some point have our colleagues talk about some of the recruitment and retention innovations and sort of emerging practices that we're learning about nationally that really help with recruitment and retention. I don't know the average tenure of a foster care provider. We can maybe see if we can get the average duration of a license. So we know that we have about 2,600 homes licensed. Their capacity is for up to 4 children. So that's their capacity. But we can get back for the committee if there's a way for us to know the tenure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a follow-up on Representative Barker's, where my office is at work, I look across the street at the one of the agencies that does it. And several times in that time, I've seen the sign change. Is it just because a bid was lost and another one comes in? It might be KVC's there, TFI comes in, and then there'll be a change again. Is that just someone lost a contract and someone is replacing them?
Well, sure. I'm not sure of that circumstance or the building, but in terms of the state of Kansas procurement processes, the request for proposal for foster care had been contracts and are now grants. Over the years has been approximately every 4 to 5 years. This current award started October of 2019, and it is for up to 4 years renewable. So they run approximately 4 to 5 years. Of course, folks at the end of each year could have a chance not to renew, but typically the history has been those grants or contracts. The total duration is 4 to 5 years.
Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reducing that number down to 6,500. That's a great news. How has COVID in the last, do you have any data on how COVID's impacted, movement in and out of the foster care children or providers? Do you have any information on that as what's been the impact in the last couple of years?
There have been a number of factors, I think, that have helped reduce the need for foster care. So it's been difficult for us to pinpoint that the pandemic reasons might have impacted some aspects. Anecdotally, what we believe is that for some decision points with the court that might lead to an adoption or termination of parental rights, because of some administrative rules and fairness and regulation, sometimes courts would want to have the termination of parental rights in person, and that sometimes the court processes weren't allowing that in different judicial districts. So anecdotally, we think that some termination of parental rights or adoption consents could have been delayed 2 to 3 months based on administrative health protocols. We haven't seen data on that, but anecdotally, that's what we hear. I think what we know is that it's been an opportunity for us to look at preventing foster care, providing for basic needs, making sure that caregivers of children in foster care have everything they need, especially during the time when there might have been hybrid education going on. Did they have the supports? We know Kansas has a challenge with timely permanency, but we also know we've been having a lot more legal permanencies, which has helped reduce children in care. So at this time, right now, I don't know that we've been able to identify or pinpoint any one determinant or even how the pandemic has impacted this short time frame. Adoption is really the only sort of more anecdotal legal permanency information that we have.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, ma'am, thank you for being here. And a follow-up to Representative Black's comments and his questions. I wondered how much during the years preceding the COVID was the system dependent on reports from social workers and from school workers for reference for need of foster care? Was that an important role?
Yes, mandated reporters are an important part of a child and family well-being system. We know that educators are about 30% of all the reports that our agency receives regarding abuse or neglect, or even perhaps a need for service, a family in need of assessment. When the pandemic first began in March through about May of 2020, the number of reports did decrease because schools were not in session or they were sort of transitioning. But what was interesting was the percentage of reports that we still received from mandated reporters, the percentage was still the same. So we received from social service professionals, law enforcement, certainly anonymous reports. So what we know is there was a 4-month period where reports reduced, I think 1 month in May, even 50% of what you would normally expect. But it has returned or restored to the same pace of all the reports. So our agency experienced about a 4-month duration where reports to our agency regarding child abuse and neglect were reduced, but they did restore back up to that same number after about 4 months.
And if I could have another question, then my follow-up is then, though I understand what you're saying, but I'm wondering whether or not there was less points of contact because of the COVID and the separation over the last couple of years or year and a half to where the social workers in the schools were not in contact with those that were not in the classroom, and they maybe didn't know what the needs were because they weren't seeing the signs that were coming into the classroom and on the school grounds. Does that make any sense?
Yes, sure. And yes, I do think that makes sense for March through May of 2020. Oh, we also know schools were finding other ways. Schools and other community services were finding other ways to do outreach and make connection with students. So I don't know that we'll ever have data, but yes, you're correct. We did receive fewer reports for the first 4 months of the pandemic.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Reese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if the state's participation in the Family First program, the impact of that, has that helped to decrease the stays in the offices and things like that?
We think there's a number of factors that have helped prevent the need for foster care. Certainly, Family First has been amazing. There are 4 evidence-based type programs in the realm. One of those is mental health services. So we've been able to implement through Family First prevention, evidence-based mental health services that prevent foster care, multi-systemic therapy, functional family treatment, and parent-child interaction. That has been wonderful for families. We also know the parent skill building that we have. And we also have a KinTech program, which provides preventive legal services to families to help them address their legal needs. So we know that has been a factor, the 1,800 families that have been served since October of 2019. We also know there's a lot of community, other supports too, mental health and school programs, the increase in home visiting programs, any program that we can do for a child age 0 to 4 helps prevent foster care. Any supports that you can give the family that helps them get connected to resources earlier makes a difference. It can prevent an unnecessary referral to DCF, and it can prevent foster care. The largest age group of children who come into care is age 0 to 4.
Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does your office deal with the Indian Child Welfare Act cases?
Yes, certainly we have policies and procedures. We ask families for their heritage or any knowledge. Depending on what they know, or maybe even if they wonder, we do reach out to the different nations. We have contacts. We're required to send correspondence to different nations and notify them so that that nation can make a decision on their own, how to interact or engage with that family or engage on behalf of that child.
And do you feel like the current statutes in place, maybe at the state level, ensure that this process is more smooth? Do you feel like your workforce has the proper training to ensure a smooth process?
I do believe that the federal and state, and then we have policies and procedures in place, are adequate. Do you think, especially for new folks who we hire on, we need to make sure that we are reinforcing that transfer of learning, that they know what the procedure is, that we're all of us are asking the right questions so that a family has an opportunity to answer. And certainly when foster care, if that's the best decision for the child to enter foster care, there are some court processes as well in terms of making sure that those questions are asked of the family so that it goes on the court record as well. So there are some reinforcements as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for presentation. I enjoyed it in appropriations, and I'm learning additional things today, so thank you very much. I want to follow up a little bit on Dr. Epley's question about the children in offices, and it came out in appropriations. You know, when I first heard about that a couple years ago, I had visions of kids sleeping under the desks or on the floor, and you sort of explained what the situation was. And granted, we don't want kids sleeping in offices, but I felt a little better after you explained what a little more about that situation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for an opportunity. That's right. We don't want any children who experience a failure to place. But if it does happen, or if it needs to happen, the offices in which they're staying are family-friendly offices. They're not, I think sometimes the question has been asked, are they sleeping on the floor? No, they're not. These offices are in communities. They're family-friendly. They have furniture and beds and televisions and games and toys. And these are offices that the children and families may even be familiar with in terms of if that child or youth has gone there previously for a youth engagement activity, or maybe they've gone there for a parent interaction time or classes alongside their parents. So the offices have appropriate furniture and bedding and enrichment for any child who would need to spend the night there.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for a second time. I appreciate you being here. We don't get a chance at having somebody that has some knowledge on this often. I guess I have two questions. One, does DCF provide training for teachers, have a program, or is that the responsibility of the schools to be able to recognize symptoms or signs of abuse?
Yes, DCF does have a curriculum and an opportunity that has, for the past couple of years, been virtual for mandated reporters. So certainly school educators are part of that. We've actually, the past couple of years, had a really neat collaboration with State Board of Education and even Emporia School District around thinking about that curriculum, how effective it is, thinking about not only assuring mandated reporters, but mandated supporters and shifting to that. So the short answer is yes, DCF has a curriculum. We're required to maintain a curriculum. Kansas Children's Service League does a great job. They also have opportunities for mandated reporters or really anyone to join their curriculum. And then there are some other organizations that also do maybe shorter versions. We also know through our collaboration with the Department of Education, a lot of school districts do have their own. They have it as part of their annual orientation when folks come in the fall. And I didn't know that until Amanda Peterson let me know that. So schools, many school districts do have their own.
That being the case, do you see a monthly uptick in those months that when school is on versus the summer months when the school is not in session? Have you done any analysis of that?
Yes, we know historically that October and April are the months with the greatest number of reports. October is also the first month that schools might start tracking or implementing, looking at school attendance or truancy. But yes, we know, we can tell in terms of the report source of educators, which are the greatest months from educators, and those are October and April.
And I appreciate that. And to me, I have to agree with the previous representative, the state makes a poor parent, and anything we can do to minimize that and make sure that the people that's doing that reporting is trained well enough to recognize actual things and not let something slip through the crack. But I appreciate your candidness in answering that. Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Barker.
For a second time. Just a question. Under Chapter 38, the court has to make a finding that the child was without the care or control necessary for the child's physical, mental, or emotional health, or it has been sexually abused. And then there's another couple of items we had to look at. Do you keep data on that, on what the findings were for children that was just found to be child needed care? They may have not been out of home placement, but do you keep that data?
We would have numbers on the data. Are you asking about the reason that they needed foster care?
Yeah, which paragraph the court would use or what the allegations were?
Yes, we do.
Tanya, I'm going to ask, but you said two things was not out of care, so you're saying they're not a sink?
No, they're a sink.
Okay.
But there's like three things that you have to find, whether they're sexually abused, or whether they're physically abused, or whether they were just without the care or control necessary for the child's physical, mental, or emotional health. And I'd just like to see the numbers, if that's possible.
Sure.
If you'd send that to the committee secretary. Sorry, I guess you are a secretary, so.
Yes,
Yes,
we can do that. I can tell you in general, about last year, around 76% of children who enter foster care entered for a reason of abuse or neglect. There is about a quarter, 24%, who enter foster care for a reason of a need of an assessment, so not abuse, neglect. So that could be perhaps an overwhelmed parent, a child behavior problem, for whatever reason a parent is unable to be able to meet the needs of that child. Truancy is also another example that it's categorically not abuse, neglect, but it is a reason that they can enter foster care. The greatest reason children enter foster care is neglect.
right, care, control. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And neglect includes a lack of supervision, physical neglect, medical neglect, and educational neglect, but it's the broadest category.
All right, thank you.
Representative Berquist.
Yes, ma'am. For the fifth year, I just want to say that for the ones that are in the first year, this year and the second year and the third year, sometimes it's frustrating not to get legislation by the numbers out, but when we have an opportunity for informational hearings to listen to the people that are in the field directly and answering questions as frankly as you can and as fully as you can, that's great for us, and it's great for making good decisions. So it's it's worth the time, even though sometimes it's frustrating to not be moving forward on actions. But if we don't have good information to make those actions, then it's not worth it. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, are there further questions? Yeah, I think one of the things that's been my experience over the years is in working in the area of foster care, it's not so much the folks in DC, in DCF, in Topeka, as it is what happens from the regional offices down to their work case managers and then down to the contractors. And we get miscommunication. Then you add school into there. We've got all different levels of kids because we've got, I know we had a big discussion last Friday about PRTF beds and QRTF beds and some of the things that the feds are doing with us. I would like, for more people to kind of understand this system. And when she says this is high level, this is high level. You can take one section of this and start diving into it. But I think the more that legislators know, and they get, that way when they get a call from a constituent, is I call the Topeka office and find someone to talk to. One thing that's very important when you're dealing with some of these cases with your constituents is we have to remember that the confidentiality is very, very important. And I know that DCF takes that very, very serious as well. So that means we don't go running out to the press and, announcing their names or announcing the judges or the workers and that type of stuff. But they'll work through you and get through a case. Because we know, and Tanya's helped me on several over the years, is we're going to have kids that fall through the crack for whatever reason. And it's sad and it breaks our heart. And this isn't the first time Tanya's heard this, that DCF does not make a good parent or government doesn't make a good parent, because they know that as well. So I hope that more legislators will not see them so much as the bad guys, but what they're working with up here may not be getting translated up with what's ever dropped through the crack. But I can guarantee you that when you make a call to them, they get in there and figure it out. So this is going to be the first of several programs. I did have a conversation with Representative Concanon because she does the Children's and Seniors Committee, to let her know it wasn't about me getting involved in the work that she's doing, but how we get more legislators to understand what's actually going on. Who can you contact? Who do you call? Some people are just more receptive than others. Are there bad actors? Absolutely, there's bad actors, but there's bad actors in everything that we do, in every field that we have out there. But I've just found them real receptive, and it always breaks my heart that I have to get as high as Topeka sometimes to resolve these things, but they will help us resolve it. So if you have questions that you didn't get answered today, or you think of after you're out of here, or you have a situation come up with a constituent, write those down. We can get them to Tanya and whoever Tanya wants us to send them to. May not be her necessarily, but they'll work with us. And I think sometimes people become adversarial with them a little bit more because we don't want any kid removed. But there's legitimate reasons for removing kids. So no further questions. Tanya, I want to thank you very much because I know we had you last week and got that snow day thrown in there, which was good and bad. It made us get behind on things, but we appreciate it, and we'll be looking forward to setting up our next meeting. Thank you. All right, committee, that is it, and I don't think we've got anything next Thursday or tomorrow. I'm a good chair. No, I'm a good chair. I just want everybody to know. No. So we don't have, our next hearing, so we will be adjourned until Monday at 1:30. The dental bills we were supposed to have yesterday is what we will have. I might go ahead and tee you up is on Tuesday. I plan to do a hearing. We think we're going to have all the language is on the 988 legislation with changes that we have worked with some of the providers. And then on Wednesday, we will work the 988 legislation. Then it will be my intent on Thursday to work the CanCare extension bill. So if you have amendments, let's get them drafted. We're adjourned.